Okay, we're ready.
You ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
Okay. I was in Peekskill. This was in the second concert, the second Robeson concert. I was coming home from Peekskill. I was walking. I lived on Oregon Road, about 3 miles from Peekskill, and I was walking home. I was about 12 years old, and I saw this little white placard on the sidewalk, and I turned it over, and it said, "Wake up, America, Peekskill did." And I didn't understand what that meant. So I took it home and showed it to my mother, and she said, "Well, they're having a concert, a second Robeson concert up in thing, and there's a lot of people up here. It's a big disturbance or something." So a friend of mine came along, and a young friend of mine, and we went on up to the concert where the concert was, and we hung around there and watched all the commotion and everything. Later that day, when I came home, I lived on Oregon Road, just about a mile from where the concert was, and they were stopping cars at Gallows Hill Road, right off Oregon Road, and they were tipping the cars over, smashing the windows. People were crawling out of the windows and stuff. So this family stopped in my yard, in our driveway, and they obviously had been from the concert. They were from New York. It was a man and his wife and 2 children, I think, 2 young children. And they were afraid to go down because they could see that the cars were being stopped at Gallows Hill, and some of them were being bashed in and everything. So they pulled in our driveway and they stayed there, and they were telling my mother that they were afraid to go because they had children in the car. They waited around for an hour or so, and then when I came down there, my mother went in the house and took that sign I'd found, "Wake Up America, Peekskill did," and she told them to put it in their front window. "Put it in your front window. Wake Up America, Peekskill did." And then she said to me, "Frank, you go down with them and tell them they were visiting our house." So that's what I did. I went down, because I knew all the people there. They were all people in the neighborhood. And I told them, "These people are right there visiting my mother. And they're friends of our families and so forth." So they let them go on through.
Wow,
and
what a story.
Another interesting thing that I found, this was at the first concert. There was a large mound where that concert was down in the valley, but before you went down there was a dirt road, and there was a big high cliff there, a mound of dirt, a big high cliff, and the cars were all parked up on top of that cliff. And they were, when the riot took place, the young guys around there took the cars and pushed them off that cliff, and they ran down and mashed in the pond down below. There were dozens of cars were smashed and everything, and those cars were all hauled down to a service station near the rock cut near Ansville Creek, in the Peekskill. And the owner of that place, I can't think of his name now, later said that most of those cars, nobody ever came back to claim them. They were towed down there, but the owners never came to pick them up.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that curious?
Yeah, it is.
So I'm trying to think what else I can remember about that. I was very young at the time, and I wasn't really interested in it, the background of these riots. I didn't know really know much about what they were about. They were just some disturbance.
Did you ever run into kids who would be bragging about it, or?
Oh, sure. At the time, sure. I knew all the kids that were doing this. Sure, they were all neighborhood kids. They were all kids in the neighborhood and everything. Sure.
Didn't you say that? Didn't you say that you knew kids who were pitching cars that had been parked down this hill or something like that?
Yeah, that's what I was saying with that riot. They were pushing them off the cliff. Yeah. They also went down there. They were throwing the chairs at the first one. They were throwing the folding chairs. They threw them all in a pile and set them on fire. They had made a bonfire of the chairs. And I remember I was a child at the first riot. I remember the paper that night, the Daily News, the New York Daily News, and on the front page there was a picture that was taken by a photographer right down in the riot, when the riot took place. They showed the people struggling with each other, and they had around this picture, they had showed one guy there. He had a knife in his hand, like this, and the news had a circle around that hand to show that the guy had a knife. You know, he was using a knife. And I don't know whether he stabbed anybody or not, but there was a knife in his hand. Yeah, it was It was very memorable. Made a deep impression on me. But it was presented at that time because all these things have to be put in context. That was the time when we were first recognized. It was the beginning of the Cold War. We were just beginning to recognize Russia as an enemy of the United States, or we conceived it as an enemy of the United States, and it was a time where we're just starting to become anti-Russian, anti-Soviet. I remember I was in school and we had a play or something in Van Cortlandt School, and I remember that they were doing jokes and stuff on the stage, and a lot of the jokes, Soviet Russia was the butt of a lot of the jokes. That was my first realization that we were starting to move in that direction towards, anti-Russian, because we never, during the war, Russia was our ally, so we were gradually turning away from it. I just vaguely perceived that, because I remember the jokes were anti-Russian kind of jokes, nothing vicious or anything, but they were sort of making fun of Russia. And that was the view that pervaded at that time, that most people had a dim view of Russia. And one of the common things you'd hear people say at that time with the Robeson riot was that you'd heard this over and over again at the time, people saying, well, in Russia they've named a mountain after Robeson and we're naming a sewer after him, and stuff like that.
Right,
derogatory remarks like that. There was a lot of that kind of stuff. Yeah. So
let's see.
of course, the famous story of Pete Seeger, of course, is that which he repeated when he was in here, is that on his mantle he has. In his house, he has 3 rocks on top of the mantle. They were the rocks that he found inside of his car.
Yeah, he brought his children in there. And they were.
He mentioned it when he was here. Interesting.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all I can think of right offhand.
Were you aware of the Trenton Six? Because that's what the first concert was. The Trenton Six.
The Transcend?
Trenton Six. The first concert was called to help them get out of jail, or at least not be
I
lit.
vaguely heard something about that. Later, I didn't know that anything at the time. I had no idea what this at the time. But later, I think I read something about that. That was to help those people that were in Trenton.
Yeah, they were. I think they were facing the electric chair. And that was put off, and so this was like people had more black
there was
feeling.
it was really the beginning of the anti-communist hysteria. People got really hysterical about it. Of course, that was hyped up by the media. The media always does. It's doing it right now. The same sort of, they hype up everything, and try to create a siege mentality, a kind of war psychosis or something. Whip up hysteria. They're doing it now with the Middle East. You can see they're doing the same thing. It's the way they do it.
So do you think that seeing what happened changed your life in some way?
No, it was just part of that period. It was just part of that period. I don't feel that it affected me in any way. I didn't have strong political views at that time. It never really meant anything to me. I didn't have any feelings one way or the other. I didn't really understand it.
But do you think you became more political after that sort of thing? No,
I don't think so. No, I was always interested in things, and I became, I remember like when they had the Army McCarthy hearings, I watched them on television and all that stuff, and the Alger Hiss case, I watched that. That was interesting, but I was more for the drama than it was political,
What did you think about the Rosenberg trial?
Well, there again, that was of a later, somewhat later period, right? Or was that 59 or what was that? What was
No, it was 50, 52. They were
52. Okay, yeah, a few years later. It had gotten got quite serious by that time. Well, of course, we assumed naturally that they were traitors, and that was they were perfectly justified. Since then, it seems like Mrs. Rosenberg should never have been executed at all. That was a great injustice. But him, apparently, he did pass bad information. But the question of whether they should have been executed, I think that was probably extreme. You know, that would be my view of it. You know. But,
Yeah. Well, that's.
of course, have you ever seen the book by Howard Fast? Have you ever seen that book?
Yes.
You have seen that book,
yeah. I read it.
There were some copies of it that were signed by all three.
Oh, really?
They were signed by Fast, by Robeson, and by who else? Robeson, Howard Fast, and somebody else. There were three people that signed it. There's a few that are signed like that. That are all signed. They're quite valuable now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So as a book dealer, do your ears perk up for certain? Does that? I mean, that must really inform your book buying practices.
Yeah, but you know, it's funny. When I was at the sale in Southport, Connecticut, the famous sale. What's the name of that library up there? Pequot Library, the Pequot Library up in Southport, when they had their sale at the time when the Soviet Union collapsed. I forget what year that was. When it, you know, the Soviet stopped being communist, whenever that was, that year. And at the sale, the special section of the sale, they have, you know, a special section where the better books are. They had a vast collection of somebody's library of communism and communist Russia. Vast library, hundreds and hundreds of books on that subject. And all the dealers were saying, forget that, don't buy any of that stuff, you're never going to be able to sell that. Now that communism's over, nobody's going to be interested in that. And that's pretty much the case. It's very hard to sell that kind of stuff today. Stuff like that goes back to that period that when we were at war with Russia. Nobody's interested in that today. You can't sell books on that subject unless it's something very special or something unique or something, but just books on that subject don't sell at all. I thought that's interesting, you know, it's like we're just washing that out of our hair. We don't want to know anything about it anymore. It's a dead thing, you know, we're not concerned with it anymore. It's a period which, you know, and look at the kids growing up today probably have no understanding of that period at all, or very even knowledge of it, I'm sure.
They don't.
You know?
They don't.
They don't know anything about it. If you start talking about that, they don't know what they're talking about.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
You get me going, I never shut up, you know.
There he is, Bill. Surprise, surprise, looking at a book.
That's what I do.
And here we are at Frank Volkmann's shop. And there he is.
I had, my daughter was shocked one day. I was going through my files and I came across a big thick file, and it was newspaper clippings of me at book sales, where they had taken pictures of me or interviewed me at a book sale, and I would get talking to the woman, and then she'd send me through the mail, she'd send me a copy of the thing or the newspaper. So over many, many years I've gone to thousands of book sales, and so she couldn't believe that I'd been to so many. And also I was many times stopped by somebody with a television camera. I never forget, I was at the sale at Greenwich, Connecticut one time, and I was, you know, when you go into these sales, you want to get up to the books, you know, you're at the front of the line, and it's very competitive, and so you're rushing in to get in, and you're trying to get ahead of everybody else or get up to the books as close as you can. And as I'm running up the aisle, as it opened up, everybody's just rushing in. This woman with this big camera on her shoulder stops me and says, "Excuse me, could you talk to me for a minute?" And I was like, "No way!"
No way!
I pushed right past her, rudely pushed right past her, and went up to my books. And then about 15 minutes later, believe it or not, she came back to me and she says, "Are you in a better mood now?" So I let her interview me.
Oh, that's great.
But yeah. That's,
so, as a bookseller, you have seen much.
Yeah. Well, your husband hasn't done bad here, you know.
I know.